Welcome to Wildcat Science with Mrs. Hauko. This is Human Biology, Chapter 22 on the urinary system. And this is Part 1. So, please write down the overview of the urinary system. So what do we need to know? What are the big ideas? So the main function is excretion of unwanted substances, taking it out of the blood. So your urinary system is important for regulating blood volume, blood pH, the electrolytes, and the electrolyte concentrations of body fluids. So particularly blood, but blood represents all of the other fluids, so like the extracellular fluid that your cells are bathed in, and therefore the intracellular fluid that is inside the cells, so basically all your body fluids. All right, so what makes up the urinary system? You have 2 kidneys, 2 ureters, a urinary bladder, and a urethra. Let's start with one of the main players, the kidney. So please write this down. You have 2 fist-size, bean-shaped organs, and they are located on the posterior wall of the abdomen, right against your back muscles, and they are by the vertebra T12, so the last one that's attached to ribs, and then L1 and L2 and L3. And they are actually retroperitoneal. What does that mean? That means they are behind that peritoneum sac that holds all of your abdominal organs, except for the kidneys. They're behind that. And they are surrounded by a layer of adipose that fat gives it some cushioning, so it protects them. And as we know from the endocrine system, the adrenal glands are located on the top of each kidney. So let's take a look. So this is a cross-section of a human. You can see the peritoneum where the intestines and everything would be, and there is your vertebra and spinal column, and this is your back right here with some fat and some muscle, and then there is the kidney right there. So this is your belly and this is your back. Okay, what else should we know? Each kidney has a renal cortex, which is the outer region, and a renal medulla, which is the inner portion. Renal medulla or rena medulla. So the urine is made in the renal medulla, and blood comes into the kidney from the renal artery and leaves after it's been filtered by the renal vein. So urine collects in tubes or tubules and is collected at the renal pelvis, which we'll look at, which is the top of the ureter. So let's take a look at some things. We have a picture of a kidney here, cut lengthwise, and we see we have blood coming in the renal artery, and then it goes into smaller, and we have capillaries here, and this middle inside part is the renal medulla, and this very outside part is the renal cortex. We can see the renal pelvis. All these little tubes are going to come together at the renal pelvis, which forms the ureter. All right, so looking over at this picture, we have the renal cortex, we have the renal medulla, we have these little pyramids. You can see that they dyed some of the vessels here. All right, what else should we know about the kidneys? Well, we should know that they are responsible for the excretion of unwanted substances, which are metabolic waste or nitrogenous waste, toxins, extra salts, and water. So they are responsible for the excretion of toxins, any extra salt, any extra water, and then your nitrogenous waste. Because nitrogenous waste is toxic to your body. Your liver turns toxic nitrogenous waste into urea, which is less toxic, but you still shouldn't have a bunch of it around. And then your kidneys filter urea out of blood. So urea is a compound with nitrogen in it that isn't as toxic as some of the other compounds with nitrogen in them. Okay, so let's take a look at a kidney. We can see here is the kidney. You can see up here, this is the top, so the adrenal gland would be up there. You can see the ureter right here. So there's the ureter. The ureter and the veins are kind of the same color, but we have a renal vein coming in and we have it going out, and we have the artery coming in, and then the urine coming out of the ureter. One last thing to point out is the abdominal aorta. So it comes off of your heart and then it goes down like your abdomen, and it branches off, and it's still pretty big when it gets down to the kidneys. So looking at another picture, we have your kidneys and the adrenal glands, and then you can see you have the aorta, the abdominal aorta, splitting off into blood vessels in arteries into the legs, and then coming back up, you've got some pretty big veins here. And then you can see the ureters ending in the urinary bladder. Here's a simplified view. Your left one is a little higher than your right kidney, and they are on by T12, and then L1, 2, and 3. And then the kidneys sit there, and the ureters empty into the bladder, and then the bladder empties out into the outside world by the urethra. All right, moving down from the kidneys, we have the ureters. And the ureters are a pair of muscular tubes that carry urine from the kidneys to the urinary bladder. So they are made out of muscle. They're smooth muscle. And they are generally 10 to 12 inches long, and they run parallel to the vertebra. So how does urine go down? Well, gravity, but also peristalsis squishes it down towards the bladder. And the end of the ureters actually extend into the urinary bladder and are sealed by valves. You do not want things to go back up to your kidneys. You only want things to leave the kidney and go down to the bladder. So those valves make sure that urine and hopefully bacteria do not get up into the ureters and the kidneys. As we know, the ureters end in the urinary bladder. So this is a collapsible, sac-like, hollow muscular organ used for the storage and expulsion of urine. So it is an organ, it is hollow, it has muscular walls, it is also elastic and collapsible, and it is sac-like, so it holds urine. So urine slowly fills the urinary bladder as it's made in the kidneys, and then that stretches. Like I said, it has elastic walls, and your urinary bladder will stretch as it fills. So when the walls of the bladder allow it to stretch, when it's moderately full, which is about 400 to 500 milliliters of urine, which is about a pint, and a pint is 2 cups of urine, then it tells you you have to go to the bathroom. It's located on the pelvic floor, and it's posterior to the pubic symphysis. So the place where the 2 pubic bones meet, and there's that little bit of cartilage, it is right behind there. So in males, it is anterior to the rectum. In males, it's right in front of the rectum. And then in females, it's anterior to the vagina and the uterus. So in females, there's the rectum, the uterus on top, like behind, but also on top of the vagina, and then the vagina. So rectum, vagina, bladder. So the uterus is kind of sitting right there on the bladder, especially if there's a baby in there, a fetus in there. It can push on that bladder. So let's look at a picture of it in the males. So that right there is the large intestine, the rectum, the end of the large intestine. And in males, we have the kidneys up here, and they come down to the ureters, and then we have the urinary bladder, and here's this bone, pubic symphysis, and then the the urethra comes out of the bladder through the penis, and so it's a little bit longer than the females, which we will look at right here. So the females, they have the large intestine, and then they have the rectum, and then between the rectum and the bladder is the vagina, and then the vagina, you can see the uterus is kind of sitting on top, so it's behind and on top of the bladder, and then the pubic symphysis is right. So the bladder is right behind the pubic symphysis. Putting out a couple other things, we can see the kidneys would be up here, and then the ureter kind of comes down and empties into the bladder, and then the urethra, where urine leaves the body, you can notice is a lot shorter in females. And you also see that this is the vagina, and then this is the urethra. Females do not pee out of their vaginas. That does not happen. Urine comes out of the urethra. So speaking of urethras, urethras are thin-walled tubes that carry urine from the urinary bladder outside of the body. And here is a male and a female urinary bladder, and then a male and a female urethra. And then the males is kind of stretched out, and there would be the prostate and then the penis. And yeah, let's talk about the female urethra first. So it's about 4 centimeters or 1.5 inches long, and it is posterior to the pubic symphysis and anterior to the vagina. So it's behind that bone, but in front of the vagina. And the urethral opening is anterior to the vaginal opening, but posterior to the clitoris. So we'll take a look at the external orifice, the openings. So we have the vaginal opening here, and then moving anterior up towards the belly, there's the urethral opening. So that's where urine comes out. Again, females don't pee out of their vaginas. Vagina, urethra, and then the urethra is anterior to the vagina, but posterior or below the clitoris. Okay, let's take a look at the male urethra. That is quite a bit longer. It's about 20 centimeters or 8 inches, and it passes through the prostate gland, then through the penis, and it functions both as a canal for urine and a passageway for semen. So it functions both as a urinary canal and a passageway for semen. So here is a cartoon. We have the urinary bladder, and then the urethra goes through the prostate gland, through the penis, and then urine leaves the body. Okay, now that we've made it all the way through the organs, we're going to talk about the process of urination. And believe it or not, those are famous statues in Belgium, so famous statues in Europe. All right, urination is the process of expelling urine from the bladder. It's under both voluntary and involuntary control, and it's controlled by brain and sphincters. And we know sphincters are those muscular valves that open and close. So the internal urethral sphincter is an involuntary ring of smooth muscle near the bladder that will inhibit or allow urination. So the internal urethral sphincter is involuntary. It's made out of smooth muscle, and if it's closed, it inhibits. If it's open, it allows urination. And the external urethral sphincter is on the outside of the internal one, and that is not made of smooth muscle. It's made out of skeletal muscle, which means it's voluntary control. And so this will also close to inhibit, open to allow urination, but this one you control. Okay, we're going to pause there. In our next video, we will dive a little deeper into the process of urination, and we will talk about the physiology of the urinary system and how it keeps homeostasis in your body. I will see you then.